I would like to introduce the secretary of our board of directors, Phil Gator. Phil Gator is just a great friend to us. So he is going to introduce our speaker of the day, and it's my great pleasure to introduce Phil of Brandstorm.
Thank you, everyone. You know, we were talking about sensory deprivation earlier. This is that meeting. No. I've had the pleasure of knowing Norm about 6 or 7 years now, and he's actually incredible. You know, the most interesting man in the world. Well, this is the most interesting man in the world's dad. Let me tell you that. Norman began his career with a degree in business from the University of Miami, Florida, with more than 4 decades experience in senior sales management, sales training, client retention, business coaching, and creating successful sales processes. Norman has developed a strong capability for helping startups, small, mid-sized businesses, and large companies hire, train, and work together with departments to build a more profitable company. Show of hands here in the room who's used Norm, had Norm's help. Many of you. He is incredible. Upon retirement from corporate life, Norman decided to share his extensive knowledge and talent by working on a sales training and management consulting basis with small businesses, startups, and sales turnarounds. He believes that customizing sales training programs that fit the needs of his clients is the best way to enhance each client's particular and unique sales challenges. His clients have ranged from small businesses with 10 or fewer employees, generating under $2 million in sales, and up to thousands of employees generating in excess of $10 billion in annual sales. Norm Roth has been called the top sales trainer and was cited in the Wall Street Journal as a talented, powerful manager, trainer, and new business developer. Norman has also been called upon to speak at universities in their business and marketing departments. He's authored and presented CEC courses and is much sought after as a certified speaker. Not sure about the certified part of it, the certified being. Norman is dedicated to the success of each of his clients. He is honored to serve and believes in giving back and does extensive pro bono business coaching and consulting for startups and very small distressed businesses. Some little known facts about Norm. As a junior tennis star, he once played in Wimbledon. Who knew that? With Billie Jean King, so I'm not quite sure what gender he was playing at the time. You'll have to ask him. Don't go there. He was in Vietnam, and if I understand correctly, he was actually shot in service. He is a survivor, and more recently, he survived pancreatic cancer. So a lot of this forms what I know of Norm. He's tenacious, he's gregarious, he's giving. He's a fantastic coach, mentor, friend, and an advocate for the little guy. He also keeps saying that he's going to retire. And once again, old Blue Eyes is back. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Norm Roth.
Thank you, Phil. Well, that was really nice. I appreciate that. I'd like to introduce my co-speaker, Gary DiVito. Come on up here, Gary. I roped Gary into this today. Gary has 35 years of really solid street selling experience. Came from the technology industry. He's currently with William Schwartz Insurance Company, and he does a whole lot of cold calling. We're not going to do any PowerPoints today. We're going to make this interactive. If you have questions, if there's things you want to talk about, if you've had some successes prospecting and cold calling, if you have some challenges cold calling and prospecting, throw them out at us as we go through this, because what we want to do today is debunk some of these myths. But I'm going to start off with a little thing that I want to do. All of you have invested a lot of time in your businesses. You've invested money joining a fantastic chamber. You've invested money to come to this luncheon today to hear Gary and I ramble on. And you've spent a lot of time off the street to come here today. All right, so we're going to talk about the fun subject today, cold calling and prospecting, because everybody in the room loves that, right? Just so much fun. But there are myths. But I want to tell you a story, a true story about prospecting. I was in New York several years ago, before I retired from corporate life, and I was meeting one of my reps, and I had to give her a review at 9 o'clock in the morning, and she was going to get a great one because she's fantastic. Name was Christine. So I left the hotel, and I went to a Starbucks on Avenue of the Americas about 7:30 in the morning. Wanted to get some coffee and get myself psyched up for the day. But there was a long line. And I'm standing behind a guy who's about, I don't know, 6'3", 6'4", really well-coiffed hair, wearing a suit, had to be an Armani or better than an Armani. So I knew right away I had to meet this guy. Had a prospect, had a cold call him. And he was reading a Wall Street Journal. So I tapped him on the shoulder. And he turns around, he says, "Can I help you?" I said, "You sure can." I said, "I left the hotel and I left my Wall Street Journal there. I see you're reading it. When you're done, can I borrow it, please, or buy it from you?" He says, "Well, we're in a line." He says, "I was just looking at a few things. Go ahead." So he hands it to me. And I start reading it, pretending to read it, because there was no article I wanted to read. I just wanted to meet this guy, find out who he was. Handed it back to him, said, "Thank you very much." Now we're up at the barista, and he starts to order his breakfast. So I leaned over his shoulder, and I said to the barista, "His money's no good. He really helped me out. I'm buying him his breakfast." So he looked at me, he says, "You don't have to do that." And I says, "Yeah, I really do. I really appreciate the help." He says, "Well, why don't you sit with me?" And I knew that's where I was going and where I wanted it to happen, and I knew that it would happen because he looked to be that kind of a guy. So we sat down at the table. And he says, "What do you do?" And I handed him my card. He says, "Holy crap." He says, "We were just talking about your company." He says, "You have a rep working for you. Isn't her name Christine or something?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "She must have left me 30, 40 voicemail calls. And she's been sending me emails, and I haven't gotten back to her. But the reason I haven't gotten back to her is we didn't have our plan in place yet." I said, "Well, you probably should have called her, and she could have helped you work out the plan." I said, "But that's neither here nor there." He says, "How long are you in town for?" I says, "I was going to fly to Dallas tonight for some meetings, but I'm certainly glad to change my flight." He says, "Can we meet at 8:30 tomorrow morning?" I said, "Done." So we shook hands, and he went his way, I went my way. I met Christine, gave her her review. We made a few calls together with some corporations that we needed to talk to. But before I left and before we shook hands, I asked him what he was doing for dinner. He said, "Well, my wife's my social secretary. She's in charge of that." I said, "Well, give her a call." And I handed him my cell phone. And he called her. And she agreed to have dinner that night. So I said, "Where do you want to go?" So we wound up at the Rainbow Room. I had Christine call her husband. So we met there for dinner. And Christine, her husband, and this fella and his wife became very fast friends, and they're still fast friends. Anyway, move forward. We went to the meeting at 8:30 in the morning. At 12:15, we broke for lunch, came back about 1:30, left there at 4:30 in the afternoon with an $11 million purchase order. Never would have happened if there wouldn't have been prospecting and tapping this guy on the shoulder. And that's really all it is. Selling is, and cold calling is really just simply a conversation. That's all it is. Nothing more, nothing less. It's so easy. It's people meeting people, and you meet a whole lot of nice people. But we want to debunk some myths. So I put together a list of a bunch of myths. We're not doing PowerPoint today. We're making this conversational. You don't have this. You have some other things that we're going to talk about later. One of the myths is that buyers don't want to talk to you early in the buying process. Honestly, that's BS. They do. 7 in 10 buyers, there were several surveys done, over 100,000 buyers across the country. 7 in 10 buyers do want to hear from you, but they want to know new ways to make their business stronger and to grow. They want to hear from sellers because they have a need and they're looking for solutions to a problem. You know, where's Joanna? Is she around? I was talking to Joanna the other day on the phone getting a count for how many people were going to be here, get a head count. And you know, Joanna had been in real estate. And she told me in the old days it was really hard sell. And that's true. In the old days it really was. Knock them down and get them good. Then it evolved into providing some relationships. It's evolved even more now. You've got to call and be able to talk to them about solutions you can provide. And we'll talk about that a little later, but you really have to understand their company. Another fiction is cold calling is dead. And a lot of salespeople buy into that fact. Not true. 70% of the sellers you contact are going to generate a meeting with you, but you have to outreach to them. And the two best ways to outreach are dropping in to see them, believe it or not, and the telephone. Those are two of the top three. The third one is email, but it's kind of way down there. It's really all about see the people, see the people, see the people. Another piece of fiction, and this is interesting, is a lot of salespeople think it's tough to break through the noise. And it's really not tough to break through the noise. Buyers will accept meetings, people. They really, really will. I mean, Gary can tell you that, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We all get inundated with information, with mail, with telemarketers, and all that kind of stuff. But I think cold calling, it actually does cut through, especially the face-to-face cold calling, because not a lot of people do it. And because not a lot of people do it, it can actually have more of an impact. One quick way to cut through the noise.
But there are certain things that will influence them to open the door. Number one, they got to have a need. Number two, maybe they're familiar with your company because you've been promoting your company. Abby can help you do that. That's not a problem. Maybe their current provider isn't offering them the solutions that they really need. And you know, when you start talking about solutions, Phil can talk to you all day long about solutions. And you've had some real success stories, haven't you? I remember that one story you told me, and I'm going to have you tell it, and I'll pass the mic over to you, about what you did in Kansas City.
This was just listening to my client who had no marketing dollars to spend on a push. So I asked them what the issue was, and it was a company that has a kind of battered wives home and a home for homeless teens. So I don't know where it came from, but I thought about doing something that was like an art event. And in this art event, I created lifelike bodies out of newspaper, dressed them in thrift shop clothing, and distributed them lying in doorways around town. And it got them instant recognition because it was kind of a little bit eerie. It got them on 3 local network TV stations and increased traffic to their sites incredibly. So a lot of cold calling is using those kind of skills of listening and finding an opportunity to insert something into that space that you hear.
Who else has got a cold calling story to tell? Who's got one? Go ahead, Don.
I had one. I was cold calling in Elgin, and the first place I went in, the guy didn't physically throw me out, but told me to leave. It was one of these office parks where you have one after the other. Anyway, I get down the strip there. I went in, nobody's there. I went to go in the car, and I thought, I got to make one more stop. So I went around the corner, and essentially, I caught him at the right time and picked up the biggest customer I've ever had. Wow.
That's great. Here's a Starbucks card. Thanks for the story. Appreciate it. See, I told you should raise your hand. What the hell is the matter with you? What do we do every Wednesday when we're both feeling physically up to it, Lee? We go out in the street together just to have fun. Lee's my best friend in the whole world. And we just have a good time together. It's like retired old men eating out, only we just cold call. And we have a great, you know, the Romeo groups, you know? It's really a lot of fun. It really is a lot of fun. Or maybe Kevin wishes he's retired. I don't know. What do you think, Kevin? Anyway, there's another fact that's a lot of BS. And that's that buyers don't want to hear your pitch. And they want you to leave capabilities behind. Anybody ever have that when you're out there? Well, why don't you leave some information or email me some information? Anybody ever hear that? Anybody? Yeah. It's crazy. I mean, what they really are looking for is a combination of insight and capabilities into their business. So that means before you cold call, before you prospect, you need to have a target list of who you're going to cold call, where they are. Look them up on Google. Look them up on LinkedIn. Find out who the principals are or the people are that you want to talk to. Find out something about their business. Look at their mission statement if they have it. Look at their vision statement if they have it, and compare it to yours. And if you don't have one, you should write one. But if they're a smaller company, you can still find plenty of information about them. This is an information world out here right now. So you need to do those kind of things, and then when you call them on the phone or you drop in to see them, you know something and enough about them to make you the R word. What's the R word? Anybody raise your hand? What's the R word? Relevant. You need to be relevant. It's really that important because there's a lot of people out there today that aren't at all relevant to their prospects. Gary, talk to me about marketing.
Anybody out there that uses some kind of marketing mechanisms, tools, and things like that for all of their leads? Are people cold calling, referrals? Who's the business? So I started out in sales, and I just knew that I wasn't going to be able to rely on marketing. Not that marketing is bad. Marketing is good. It can be very good. It should be a part of your business. But I learned early on that if I really wanted to make a good business, that I had to cold call. The way I kind of look at it is if you're making a cake, my cold calling efforts was the cake, and marketing was the frosting on the cake. So that I knew I had to build my business because one, we're going to know much more about our prospects and prospective prospects, prospective clients than marketing will, because they're not out there on the street talking to them like we are. So there's a big advantage to being face-to-face with somebody who is a client or who is a prospective client, because you're going to get feedback that you wouldn't otherwise get through marketing efforts. Yes, marketing is important, but having that face-to-face contact and getting that kind of information is so valuable. Because then you can bring that to marketing and say, hey, guess what I learned? And then put that into your marketing efforts.
When I first started selling 109 years ago, my first sales manager talked in a whiskey tenor voice. I can't do that, Phil can. And he wore a hat and chewed on a cigar. He says, kid, you want to be successful in sales? I said, sure. He says, 3 things you got to do. You got to see the people, you got to see the people, and you got to see the people. It's really, 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 doesn't matter whether you're fundraising, doesn't matter whether you're selling B2B, doesn't matter whether you're selling B2C, it's all the same. It's all transparent. There's another myth. Nobody answers the phone. And my question is, who the hell is nobody? I don't get that. Because you can always get somebody to answer the phone sooner or later. But you have to follow up. You have to get a name. You have to ingratiate yourself to the receptionist or who's ever answering the phone and tell them you need some help. Hi, this is Norm from XYZ. I need your help. Oh, what do you need? I need to find out who does blah, blah, blah. Oh, that's Jim or Mary. Great, can you connect me? And you'll get connected. Now, you may get voicemail. And now, if you get voicemail, what do? You have to leave a very, very compelling message. Anybody have a compelling message that they can leave on the telephone? I have another Starbucks card. If anybody's got a great compelling message that's working for them that you would like to share with the group, anybody? I was trying to get hold, I'll give myself a Starbucks card. I was trying to get hold of a guy who was the CEO of a major corporation. Phil told you I had pancreatic cancer that I beat. And they made a cereal that was really awesome for people that become diabetic because I became somewhat diabetic when they took out the middle of my pancreas. Well, I went to the store one day about a year later, and it was gone. There was no cereal there. And I went to another store that I knew carried it. It was gone. And I went to another store, it was gone. So I figured, what the hell? So I called the company. Well, you got to speak to a product manager. So after about 9 phone calls and messages, I finally got through to the product manager. He says, yeah, he says, we're only doing about $400 million with the product, so we decided to dump it. We don't have it anymore. I says, you got any stock left? He says, yeah. He says, I got about 20 cases. Is it all dated good? Yeah. I says, okay, I'll give you a credit card. I'll buy all 20 cases, which they sent to me. But at any rate, I was still concerned about that. And I had a client in St. Louis that made a bar for diabetics that tasted better than this other company's bar. So I decided I was going to call the CEO of this company that discontinued the cereal. And I got to his executive assistant, and she connected me into his phone, and I left a voicemail message. I didn't get any call back. Left another voicemail message, didn't get a call back. Next day, I left another voicemail message, didn't get a call back. So I figured, okay, I got to change. I got to be a salesman. I got to do what I normally do. So I called him the 4th time, and she says, okay, I'll send you in again. He's in a meeting. I said, okay. So she connected me, and his voicemail came on, and I left him a voicemail message. This is Norm. Here's my phone number, blah, 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 blah. I've called you 3 times. You haven't called me back. Why do you want me to die? 15 minutes later, 15 minutes later, I got a call from him. He says, you Norm? I says, yeah. He says, I don't want you to die. I says, I didn't think you did. I says, but I couldn't figure out how to get you to call me back. He says, I apologize for that. He says, but we really had to make that executive decision. I says, yeah, but there's a company out of St. Louis that makes a bar that tastes much better than your bar, by the way. And he says, I'm sorry to hear that. I says, well, but it's true. I says, but you ought to talk to them about licensing your product. They're now in the process of licensing the product to these people to manage. And he says, what do you want out of it? I says, I want free cereal. So the point is, you have to leave a compelling message, and somebody will get back to you. If you leave the same garbage message all the time, hi, this is so-and-so from XYZ, and we have these capabilities, and we can do this for you. You have no idea what their needs are. Make it relevant. Social media is the only way to prospect. Gary?
You'll learn some things from social media. You get leads, referrals, what have you. But again, it's just a part of the overall business efforts that you're making to get new business.
But I will tell you, you can cold call via video. Would you agree with that, Bruce? You want to talk about that?
So video can actually turn cold calls into warm calls, because if they don't know who you are, they're not going to do business with you. No like trust. Bob Berg said that. And so when you send them a video message, you're breaking through all the clutter of all those people sending them emails because they're text. And there's no personality behind that email. But with a video, all you need is your phone, hold it up in front of your face, smile, be happy, be yourself, be authentic, and just give them the pitch that way, and be entertaining. And they'll watch it, and keep it short. Keep it maybe 15, 30 seconds, because all you want to do is get them to the next step. You don't want to sell them with that first call, right?
Absolutely. Selling comes later. You've got to get yourself in front of them first, and you've got to have a relevant conversation and determine. You know, it's funny. Selling is not hard. Selling is really very easy if you follow the steps of selling. This is kind of getting away from cold calling, but I think it's important to integrate this into the conversation. Follow the steps of selling, and you'll increase your close ratio probably about 90%. First, you meet them. Yeah? Agreed? Okay. Second thing you do is uncover or create a need. They do that at Schwartz all the time. Lee, what do you do that most insurance brokers don't do? He reads their policies and finds gaps in coverage of insurance, and they find a lot of coverages. It's not a commercial. He happens to be my insurance guy, saved me thousands of dollars, but that's neither here nor there. The point is they read the policy and they find gaps. They now have created a need for the client, for the prospect, and they close a lot of sales because of that, and they save people a lot of money, but more importantly, they save people's homes and businesses because of it. But anyway, so you find the need. Now you create a solution, and you offer them the solution in the next meeting. Anybody guess what the next step is? You have to ask them if they agree with the solution that you've provided them. Now, if they don't agree with it, you've either missed something, or you can start all over and you can get that information from them, and that's easy to do. Just spin it back. But if they say, yeah, they agree with the solution, then you have to do the step that's missed by a lot of salespeople, but the one that's used by the highly successful, high-income people. You ask them very simply what the consequences or the implications are to them or to their company if they don't move forward immediately with the solution that they agreed made the most sense. And then you close the sale. It's just that simple. There's no magic. People like me and guys like Tibor Shanto and Dave Brock and Tony Robbins and a lot of other people that do what I do make a lot of money telling you these things. You don't need us. You can do this if you just follow the steps. And there's some great books out there that you probably should read. I recommend Spin. I recommend Selling to Vito, V-I-T-O. That's the Very Important Top Officer by Tony Pernella, a good friend of mine. And it's a great book. It's a classic. I recommend One Thing. That's another great book. How many of you here own or manage a business, whether it's a small business or not? You must buy the book Traction. Get a grip on your business. Hopefully, Joanna, I'm going to be doing a series with you guys on the book Traction. You and I have got to talk about that. But I like to do it for the chamber when there's openings to do it. Probably a 3 or 5 part series. It's probably the best book for business owners and business managers you'll ever find. Small businesses, mid-sized businesses, large businesses, it makes no difference. It's an absolutely great, great book. Here's another myth. Prospecting is something I do when I'm caught up with all my other work. Major mistake, Gary?
I fall into it too, but it is something you want to put on your calendar, schedule it. Because at some point, you're going to be all caught up and you have nothing to do except cold call, where you actually want to be bringing in more business. So it's important to schedule time to make cold calls, whether that's face-to-face or the phone calls or whatever. At some point, you're going to need it, and then you might be more of a desperation. You don't want to do it from desperation. Schedule.
Number of years ago, a lot of years ago, I had a sales rep that was working a rural, very rural territory. The outskirts of Kansas and Nebraska, like 2 blocks farther, you fall off the end of the world kind of territory. Very, very, very rural. So I called him and told him I was going to spend a couple days doing a ride along with him and to make some appointments, but also we wanted to prospect and cold call because he hadn't been in that territory very long, and we had to find some better prospects. So he says, okay. So he did his target list, went out to meet him in Valentine, Nebraska. And then we went south from there. Anyway, we made a couple of appointments, made a couple sales, and we dropped in on a cold call in this old 2-story crusty building. I don't think Lee would insure it. Maybe he would. Anyway, you could. You're licensed in 50 states. Anyway, we go in, and the owner comes out. He says, I don't have time to see anybody. It's the end of the month, and I'm busy doing my books, his accounting. So my sales rep said the right thing. He says, I get it. I know you're busy, but we're out here, and we promise not to take a lot of your time, and more importantly, we promise not to waste your time. He says, all right, I'll give you 15 minutes. So we go into his back office, and we sit down, and it was an old building. And my rep says, I need to go to the bathroom. Can I use your restroom? We've been driving a long time. He says, sure. He says, you go up the stairs, and the bathroom's at the top of the stairs. He says, right over my office. So the rep goes up there, and the owner and I are sitting and talking about his business and warming him up a little bit. And all of a sudden, some plaster starts coming down from the ceiling. And the next thing you know, the toilet with my sales rep sitting on it with his pants around his ankles comes through the ceilings, and he's out cold on the floor. He hit the porcelain of the toilet and knocked himself out. Absolutely insane. So you got to recover from these kind of barriers, right? So I just cracked up. I says, hey, he's worthless anyway. He may as well just lay there. So anyway, we brought him back to consciousness, poured water on him, the whole thing. Made him feel a little better. Abby should have been there because Abby's a nurse. So, but anyway, she would have laughed. She would have let him die. Anyway, now we're sitting around the table after he's come to consciousness, and we're looking at this hole in the ceiling, But at the end of the day, the guy felt bad, and he gave us an order, and he gave us 2 referrals that closed into new business. See, you never know where your business is going to come from. I mean, it's really, really strange. So Gary told me to ask you a question, and he's going to go through this with you. You have on your sheet, you have on your table, was on your chair, 7 tips for cold calling. Gary, go ahead. You wanted to ask a question.
Before I do that, I have to go to the washroom. No, just kidding. Yeah, right. So what's the biggest thing that holds us back from cold calling? Why do we not like to do it? Anybody. Objection, exactly. We fear that somebody's going to say no. And probably most of the time we're going to get a no initially. But I think we need to change our frame of mind is really what it amounts to, that, well, I have something of value. I believe that I can help this person. And if you believe in your heart that you can help somebody, maybe you don't end up helping that person right away. But if you believe in your heart, I think that really helps quite a bit. So I always think about, before I make a cold call, whether it's on the phone, and I'll honestly, the phone cold calls to me are harder than the face-to-face. I'd much rather do a face-to-face. So I'm trying to think about objections. So if I'm out knocking on people's doors, I know that the first objection that we're going to get typically is what? And Norm actually mentioned it with that one. I don't have time. Okay? So when I approach somebody, what I do is I'll just say, hey, look, I was in the area. I've got a few other stops that I have to make at another meeting, so I don't have a lot of time. So I'm removing that objection before they tell me. And that's what you want to do, is think about what are the objections and remove them as quickly as you can, and it makes it a lot easier. So their guard comes down when you say, I don't have a lot of time, because they don't want to spend a lot of time. So that opens the door and then you can kind of have a dialogue from there. And I think that's the real key thing to this whole thing that Norm mentioned earlier. It's about a conversation. That's really what sales is. Yeah, there's processes and things like that. That's important. But in the end, you're having a conversation. And again, you want to remove those objections before they become one, and it makes the process a lot smoother.
Let's talk about that for a second, because Gary brings up a good point. You got to close that door to those objections. So everybody's got a pen on your table, and you got a sheet. So turn that sheet over. And I want you to draw 2 parallel lines with a space in between them. Make sure 2 parallel lines, but make sure there's a space in between it. Now, on the left-hand side of the paper, in the middle of the space, draw an arrow to the far right-hand side. Now, on the top line, put a couple boxes. And on the bottom line, put a couple boxes. And in those boxes, put T, P, F, maybe another P, could be anything. What you've got there, anybody know what it is? It's called the hallway to the sale. And as you walk along that hallway, you're going to run into open doors. Could be fear, could be price, could be politics, could be agenda, could be anything. That's what those letters in those boxes represent. Could be any number of things. If you don't slam those doors shut before those objections are voiced, you're going to have to start over, and it's going to make your selling job, your cold calling job to get an appointment or get a meeting that much harder. It's going to make your selling job to sell your product or your service that much harder. I was called out east to a pharmaceutical company. And they said, we're having problems. He says, we've got 110 salespeople on the telephone in our call center calling doctors, trying to sell injectables and vaccines. He says, and we're not making our numbers. Can you come up for a week and train our salespeople? So I said, sure. So I went up there. And I said, I want to sit in the room and I want to listen to your people. Make these cold calls. And I did. And after a half hour, I walked back into the manager's office, says, let's go see your VP, the guy that hired me. We went back to his office. I said, okay, cancel my hotel reservation, change my flight. You don't have to pay me the 10 grand for the week. You can pay me 2 grand for the day. I'm going home tonight. Problem is going to be solved. He says, get out of here. I says, no. I says, come on in, I'll show you. So we went back into the room, and I said, give me somebody to call. So I made a call. We put it on speaker so everybody could hear it. Receptionist answers the phone. Hi, this is Norm with XYZ Pharmaceuticals. I'd like to speak to Doc. If Doc's busy with a patient, because you guys sound really busy, more than happy to talk to charge nurse. Nurse comes to the phone, says, doctor's in a meeting. I says, no problem. I says, you guys sound really busy. She says, yeah, it's flu season. We're going crazy. I says, I'll make it fast. I know you're currently buying your injectables and vaccines from, and I mentioned 3 different distributors or wholesalers. I said, we manufacture those products. You can save a little money, maybe 15%, but that's not what's important. What's important is if you order by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you'll get it by 10 o'clock the next morning. So I guess what I need to ask you is, what are you getting ready to order? She says, funny you called. She says, because we've been so busy, we haven't had a chance to order. Let me go to the refrigerator. She goes to the refrigerator, comes back, I need this, 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 and this. I says, that's great. What days do you normally order? Because this was on a Monday. She says, normally we order on a Thursday. I says, all right, morning or afternoon better, and I'll have our rep call you. She says, well, probably in the morning, 10, 11 o'clock. I said, ask for you? She says, yes. I says, who's your backup just in case you're not there? So she told me, got her backup name. I says, do I need a purchase order? She says, just use today's date. She says, in my name. No problem. You'll have your product by 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Thank you for the business. Made 13 calls, got through to 11 offices, and made 11 sales. Doesn't make me a great salesperson, but what I did was close the doors to the objections before they were voiced. They couldn't tell me they were busy. I told them they were busy. Couldn't tell me they were buying from somebody else. I told them they were buying from somebody else. It's just that simple. So what you need to do, if you're smart, and you're all smart, or you wouldn't be here, is make a list of all the objections that you run into on a day in and day out basis. And then make another list of what you've found successful in overcoming those objections. And then when you make your phone calls, or you're dropping in on person, or if you're meeting somebody to make a presentation, you're going to slam those doors shut, and it's going to make your job a lot easier, and you're going to up your closing rate to roughly about 90, 92%. Just that simple. Gary, you want to go through these 7 tips for cold calling?
Certainly. So number 1, focus all of your questions on your client, not yourself. And again, that's just about being likable and knowing their business. So all your questions should be about them, what's important to them. So it's, if you're looking at a specific industry category, again, what's important to that category first?
People don't care how much you know until they know how much you. Thank you.
And that's actually, and that people say they like to do business with people that they like. Well, if you don't meet people, if you don't meet a business owner or the decision maker, how are they going to like you? So another reason to cold call. Wow, pretty brilliant, huh? No, just kidding. Yeah. Wow, there we go. So plan all of your questions in advance. I think that's so important. Again, that's about removing objections also in advance. So make sure you have a good list of questions, thought-provoking. You want to think about things that other people aren't asking them, and that's really important. I had a visit with a lady yesterday. I asked a whole bunch of questions. I understood their business, but I had to ask questions, and she said, "Well, nobody's ever asked me that before." I said, "Well, it's pretty important, and here's why." So that's a way you can help to distinguish yourself, because now you're showing yourself as a professional. Don't follow any cold calling scripts. I agree with that. You don't want to sound scripted, but you do want to be planned. So sometimes that might involve a script, but I think it's important as professionals that if we're using a script, it needs to sound fresh to the prospect. It shouldn't sound scripted. So there are times we have to be an actor. We are performing. So it's really important that if you're using a script, make sure it doesn't sound like one. So again, it's part of being a professional. Don't overwhelm your prospect during the first meeting. Absolutely. Again, especially if you're doing a cold call. Hey, I don't have a lot of time right now. I just wanted to stop in because I was in the area. If you give them too much information and you become too overbearing and you're trying to sell right then and there, they're going to push back. Okay. My personal opinion is my approach is really more, I guess, consultative. I don't feel that I'm selling. I feel I'm educating and informing, and I want them to buy. So it's just a little bit, it's about a frame of mind. Don't attempt to sell on your first cold call. I guess I would put one caveat to that. If they have an immediate need and they're the ones prompting that they want to buy right now, I certainly wouldn't hold them back. But I absolutely agree. You don't want to push for a sale on a first call. Keep your prospect relaxed. Again, that's about removing the objections. Hey, I don't have a lot of time. And I think, bringing jokes like Norm's stories. I love that story about the guy going to the washroom. That's going to stick with me for a long time, I think. But anytime you can bring a little bit of humor, put them at ease, have a conversation. That's all it is. People do like to do business with people that they like. So just be a real person. It's really what it amounts to. Find out what benefit will make your prospect buy from you. So again, that's about asking the right questions, what's important to them, and then tailoring your solution around their needs.
That's good stuff. You have to understand what their current business situation is. I had a sales rep in a call center in Ireland. And I went to visit that call center manager because that center was doing really, really well. And I said, let me talk to Terry, because Terry was their top rep, a really sharp lady, really, really sharp lady. And I said, you're number one, and we have 3 call centers, one in Dallas, one in Toronto, and one here in Ireland. I said, and you're number one in all of our call centers. I want to listen to what you're saying because I want to know what's making you so good. And then I want to take you around to all the call centers and have you train those people. So she says, well, I got to make a call now. So she made a call, put it on speaker. And the guy says, another sales rep, what the hell do you want to sell me now? And she said, I don't want to sell you anything. I want to understand your business. I want to understand more about what issues you're having and challenges you're having in your business. She says, I'll give you a solution, then I want you to buy. She says, I never sell anything. I want my clients to buy. I fired the manager and made her the manager. She was great. You have an opportunity creation sheet. Let's take a look at it real quick. I want you to look at this. We don't have to do anything with it now. This really speaks for itself. But these are metrics that you should be tracking. It will help you in your cold calling. These are very important things. So this is homework for you. And if you ever want to call me about any of these things, you all have my card, and I'm a phone call away from you. The other thing you have is what's called a greatness tracker. How many of you track how many calls you're making a week, how many appointments you're making, what's happening with them? This was put together by Brian Schmidt. He's a great mortgage broker, and it works extremely well for him, and I think this would work well for all of you. Any questions? Any concerns? Anything that's challenging to you? Yes, Don.
I often run into the person at the window saying that she or he's in a meeting. I get that a lot. You know, I fully suspect that that's not all.
Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Some people screen, and you can say, great, I don't want to bother. I'm going to leave my card. I need their direct number so I can call them direct. And could you please share their email with me, because I'd like to send them some information. What time does a meeting normally, do you think the meeting will break? Because I'm in the area and I'll be more than happy to stop back. Thank you.